Y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here. I have a story today, actually quite a few stories. They're kind of all rambled into one because we're going to talk about poisons, the history of poisons, and what they can do, the remedies if there are any, the symptoms if something was to happen. There's so many different types, and we're going to go over them, and each one has a little story that goes along with it that's kind of like a famous poisoning or whatnot. And so we're going to go over that as well. This video is probably going to be a little bit long, but that's okay. The Nakalua Falls is coming up this weekend, so I just want to let you guys know that I have not forgot that. I have to plan everything, so you know how it goes. Anyway, if you're new here, my name is Brandy, and what I do is I bring dark history stories to life. Stories you've never heard before about witches, werewolves, vampires, whatever, poisoners. And I bring that story back to life by telling it to you and putting some makeup on my face. So that sounds awesome to me. Please subscribe. And like I say, today is a good story, and I'm excited to go ahead and get started. So let's get the party started. So you could be wondering, why do you do poisons? Well, because a man named King James decided to change healers in a certain book to witches and make it sound like it's a terrible, terrible thing to poisoners. And so we have to have a knowledge of poisons for us in order to be able to help heal somebody. You have to know what they've ingested, what they've eaten, what they've inhaled, what they've rubbed on their skin, what they've put on their clothes. You got to know those types of things so that you can know how to heal. But that's a whole other different video, and that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about poisons, and there's a lot of different kinds, so I'm just going to touch on a few. But the most of all the poisons, of course, that we have of is plants. I mean, plants can be good and plants can be bad, and they can be both. And so that's what we're going to go over today. Now, herbs have been used forever and ever to help heal people. It's just been a thing. That's what shamans did. That's what all the types of people did. So basically what I'm saying is knowing the different kinds of herbs and what they do, and if they're poisonous, and what parts of it are poisonous, and what parts are not poisonous. Because there's some plants out there that have poisonous roots, but the flower is totally fine. I know there was a discussion on TikTok not too long ago about using bluebells and how it's toxic, and I was like, unless you're putting the root in there too. But I'm pretty sure old girl is using flowers. But you know how people are. They think they know everything, and so they pick up a book and they start to read, and then you really start to learn things. Okay, and what I learned is that supposed witches, would use a salve on their broomsticks. This is where the whole flying on a broomstick thing comes from, okay? Henbane, aconite, and belladonna are plants that can cause hallucinations in the sense and feel like the sensation of flying. So in medieval times, healers would apply the salve with these ingredients to their downstairs area, and they would apply it with a broomstick. And so thus coming up with the whole witches flying on brooms, because once they applied this salve down there, which was made up of a bunch of poison, basically, it gave them some kind of itch that could only be relieved by having relations with somebody. And so they would use this stuff I'm telling you, the stories are wild. But that's where witches flying on brooms came from, is from that salve. Belladonna, aconite, and henbane together is all hallucinogenic, evidently. And if you rub it on you, then you're going to feel like you're flying. When in actuality, you're not. Now, poisoning plants was a gamble, okay? Because back then, they didn't have a way to measure the toxicity of each plant, because the plant could come from a neighboring plant but be a lot stronger than the original plant. You know what I'm saying? Now we have the scientific ability to look into plants to see if it's strong too strong, you know. I mean, it's kind of like that with smoke, you know. They do certain types of tests to see certain types of things. And so most of the time when it comes to plant poisonings, you could poison somebody and it could kill them, or they could just get over it and then you'd be busted, because most of the time with plant poisons, they work themselves out of the body because it's plant. It's when we start getting into chemicals and things like that that wreck your body. Absolutely insane. But before we get to chemicals, we gotta talk about fungi. Yeah, mushrooms and all the fun things that come with that too, because that's part of the plant community now. So we're going to talk about the fungi. Fungi is also called mycotoxins, and most of the poisonous mushrooms are actually toadstools. Yeah, like a lot of people end up eating toadstools by mistake, thinking that they're mushrooms that they can eat, when in actuality they're not. They're toadstools, like under disguise or something. You know, they're very potent. Toadstool, like I say, it's very, very, very. The death cap toadstool is one that is just stay away from it, like 100%. And then fly aragic mushroom. Okay, now this one was used in shamanic practices in a very, very strange way. This mushroom is also supposedly responsible for Santa Claus. Don't worry, we're gonna get there. But first, the indigenous peoples of Siberia used to use this mushroom, the fly organic, something like that, some kind of mushroom, okay? And he would ingest the mushroom, and others would, how do I say this without getting in trouble, drink his urine, as like, I guess his kidneys and things and liver would like filter out the bad stuff, so that all his people would get would be the hallucinogenic part. And so he would take on the experience of filtering out this medicine, okay? And it's actually a really, really poisonous mushroom, so you really got to know what you're doing with this thing. Like, so for a shaman to swallow these mushrooms in order, and then people drink his urine to experience hallucinations. That's in the indigenous in Siberia, okay? You know, hey, holler at him, holler at him. He would filter out all the bad parts, the sweating, the nausea, the itching. He would go through all that so that everybody else would just experience the happy parts. Like, I mean, talk about being a healer. That's a true healer, you know what I mean? I think it's ergo also has like really similar effects to the fly organic. It grows off of rye and barley, like bread and things like that. And if you eat those, it can cause you to have convulsions. That's what led to the Salem witch trials. Sure did, because those little girls ate some bread that had some, because you know mushrooms, they be growing microscopic, so you don't know if they're bad or good, you know. Some of them you can't even see. So if you eat that, you have these hallucinations, these convulsions, and all this crazy stuff. And that's what happened at the Salem witch trials. They ate some ergo mushrooms off some rye bread, straight up, and all them people got done like that. Now we're going to move on to the animal kingdom, because yes, of course there are animals that are poisonous. And I know you probably guys, y'all are thinking of the toad, you know, the toad that you lick, the bufo toad. That's definitely one of the things. But these are called zootoxins, animal poison. So zootoxins is animal poison. Now, cane toad excretes a toxin called bufotoxin. Like I say, it's the bufo frog. I watched a whole documentary on it. Y'all should watch it. I don't know what freaking platform it's on. Probably Netflix. But it's so interesting. Like, these people go out into the desert and milk these frogs. And if you milk them too much, it will kill them. Like, they milk them to get all the stuff off so they could have this, like, you know, hallucinogenic experience. But at the same time, they don't care the fact that they're killing the toad. Anyway, let me get off my high horse on that right quick. Now, the blister beetle is one of those ones. It is these different colors. It's like a carthid. I'm not really sure if that's how you say those. I'm not sure how to say words. I'm sure y'all figured that out if you've been watching me for a long time. But a blister beetle, also known as a canarthon, can give you an aphrodisiac effect, but it can also kill you. Like anything in large doses. Come on, anything in large doses can kill you. You know, I mean, it's all about moderation. They used to put arsenic in makeup and wallpaper. I mean, so all your kid had to do was lick the wallpaper and they had arsenic poisoning. I mean, I'm just saying, it's before they knew. Before they knew. The most common of the animal kingdom, of course, are like snakes, spiders, that type of thing, where you know, poisoners would get their venom and things like that from. And yeah, it's just a good old time. So now we go on to the elements. Now, when it comes to elements, and you're poisoned with elements, it is incredibly hard to get that out of your body. Like when we've talked about arsenic in the past, arsenic will stay in your system and wreak havoc on you. Absolutely, 100%. They can cleanse your blood, they can do, but back then they didn't have like a dialysis machine, you know? They can give you medicines to help with the symptoms, and that's really just about it. So when we start talking about elements, it gets a little bit scary because like arsenic is one of the number one poisoners, like straight up. The number one poisoner is arsenic, yes. Then we get to antimony, mercury, lead, and thallium. And like I said, arsenic used to be used in makeup and wallpaper and like everyday, you know, rat poison and things like that, and everyday household items. And so this kind of freaked people out, you know? I mean, as it should. People discovered that they could just peel the wallpaper off of their wall, and then they could scrape it off, as we'll see in just a little bit. They could scrape it off and then feed it to their person that they don't really want to be around anymore. And then that's the end of that person. And so all these are chemicals that are just can wreak absolute havoc on your body. I have so many examples. I can't wait. Let me just shut up. So in the Roman Empire, they used utensils made out of lead. Food utensils like forks and knives and spoons out of lead. Half the Roman Empire ends up getting sick, especially the royals, because they think, oh, this iron is so cool, you know, we're just going to eat off of it. No. That's how you get iron poisoning. Yes, iron can be very, very poisonous. I have a real iron bracelet that was made just for me from a certain person, and even I know that I wear that in times when I really need protection or when I really need a shield around myself. But anyway, let's move on. Up next is bacteria, of course. Yes, we have weaponized bacteria. We sure have. And that would be anthrax. That is actually a bacteria, anthrax, yes. And it makes a deadly poison that literally devours your body from the inside out. Not a pretty poisoning at all, okay? And then, of course, we have the man-made things. So, like I told you guys earlier, like arsenic, that's, you know, used to kill rats. They would mix it up with different things to kill rats. They would mix it up in different things to use for wallpaper, makeup, all this other kind of stuff. Rat poison cyanide, which is also an example of man-made. Zyklon B was a cyanide-based pesticide. Yeah, used by Nazi Germany to off over 1 million people in gas chambers. So the man-made stuff is very, very scary because there's really no coming back from that. Like cyanide poisoning. And then we got sarin gas. Sarin gas was used in the Soviet Union, okay, during the Cold War, but nobody released it until 2018. I did not know that. I had no idea that they kept sarin. I knew what sarin gas was, but I had no idea they kept it on the DL until 2018. Like, we didn't already know about it, but you know, here we are. And we have polonium, which is radioactive, and all these represent poisons that are murder, that people use it for murders to this day. You know what I mean? I'm not giving you guys a guide here, by the way, on how to poison folks. Let me just say that 100% straight up. I'm just giving y'all the history of it, because now we're fixing to roll into the good stuff. So the first poison we're going to talk about is hemlock. Yes, hemlock. Hemlock is a highly toxic plant that contains quinine. I'm not really sure when it comes to these scientific terms, my friends. Don't be getting on me, okay? You know I love you. All right, so it has volatile neurotoxins that's harmful for the human nervous system. It's also known as the devil's porridge, poison parsley, and muskrat weed. Okay, and its toxic effects are really, really bad. They're really bad if you eat enough of it. Like I say, this is a plant, and so you have to think, you have to eat enough of this plant for it to have its effect on you and that type of deal. Well, hemlock is made in this, it has the same structural makeup as nicotine, okay? It disrupts the mechanism of the control system by acting on the nicotine acetylcholine receptors. Cannot say words. Symptoms of hemlock poisoning often begin with trembling, gastric pains, increased salivation, muscle weakness, rapid heart rate, loss of speech, followed by convulsions, paralysis, central nervous system depression, respiratory failure, asphyxiation, blindness, coma, and death. I know I had to read all that because that's a lot. Am I right? Yeah. So there is no antidote for hemlock poisoning. No, there is none. Like I say, all they can really do is kind of give you symptoms to not convulse and things like that. And that's really all they can do. So in 2006, an English gardener, decides to imitate Socrates' death. Because as we know, maybe you don't know, Socrates was killed by henbane. He ate a bunch of it. Or did they make him? I think I did a story on it. You know what, y'all? They're all starting to run together at this point. But anyway, and so this guy tries to mimic Socrates' death, right? And so he goes around his property and he eats a bunch of hemlock. And then they find his body like a week later. And it was insane because it revealed that the man's respiratory and nervous system had become paralyzed, which in turn restricted his movement in over 70% of his body. And then basically he just stopped breathing because he couldn't breathe anymore. So I don't know if the guy had a death wish or if he just really wanted to see if that's how Socrates died. But I guess he found out that's how Socrates died. Up next, we have belladonna, which is of the nightshade family. And I know we've talked about nightshade before because I think I just talked about it in a previous episode. But yes, nightshade is very deadly, and belladonna is of that family. And I know you probably think of Practical Magic, when she's giving him a little bit of belladonna to help her man go to sleep, you know what I mean? And that's one thing it can do, but it can also kill you. Yeah, and taken in large doses, as we see in the movie, okay? I mean, the movie's not lying. I'm just saying. Belladonna can be very, very poisonous. The symptoms of belladonna poisoning set in within several minutes and can last for several hours. So you can be going through it for a while. Early symptoms include dry mouth and throat, and dilation of the pupils, nausea, and vomiting. If left untreated, the victims will experience hallucinations, delirium, a staggering gait, and extreme drowsiness. Yes. In fatal cases, the victim's face becomes flushed, their breathing jerky, and their extremities grow cold. Okay? A coma and a rapid imminent pulse immediately precede death. Yes. The treatment is their treatment. Let's see. The antidote for belladonna poisoning is the drug physomogine, like I say with the words, which acts by increasing the concentration of that acetylcholine in the body's nervous system. So that's always a good thing. One of the famous poisonings, though, is that this Swiss nurse named Mary Jeanneret murdered 7 of her patients in 1868 after becoming obsessed with belladonna and even experimenting with it on herself. Yeah, so imagine taking that stuff and getting all kinds of crazy on it. Next up, we have lead. Yes, lead was used to kill some folks back in the day. It sure was. And lead, it would lead to chronic problems because lead is what? It's a chemical. It's a one of them things on the periodic table. An element. Yeah, my brain is not fully functional today at all. I'm like really excited about this weekend. The toxic effects of lead lead, of course, to chronic problems and things like that. Therefore, it can stay in your system for up to like a long freaking time. Unfortunately, yes. Not a good thing, not a good thing. So, what are the symptoms? Early chronic lead symptoms present themselves as irritability, loss of appetite, constipation, depression, abdominal pain, fatigue, decreased libido, insomnia, memory loss, and weakness and tingling in the extremities, followed by the appearance of a bluish line on the gums. Acute symptoms include vomiting, diarrhea, and metallic taste in the mouth, shock and decreased urination accompanied with muscle weakness, pain, tingling, headache, convulsions, coma, and death. And Beethoven died from lead poisoning. I had no idea. But this dude, lead was found in Beethoven's bones. Straight up in his bones. And it's probably because his untimely death at the age of 56. Beethoven was sick for much of his life. He'd always had depression. He always wasn't really able to eat very well. He always had issues. And so he consulted with many doctors during his lifetime, but none were able to help him. He insisted that his body be tested for poisons after he died. And it was so that nobody else would suffer as he did. And so they tested him and they came up that he had died of lead poisoning. Beethoven, the guy that wrote all the music and beautiful songs we listen to, yeah. So let's talk about mercury. Yeah, because mercury is absolutely crazy. Let me just go ahead and tell you. I remember mercury being very scary because it's in our water. It's we at least ingest 3 milligrams of it a day. Yeah, and there's at least 6 milligrams of it inside of our body all the time. So just imagine somebody piles some more mercury on top of that. It's a pretty bad death, okay? The toxic effects depends on the form that you take it, you know? You can eat it, and you can probably inhale the fumes if you're burning it, and things of that matter, because it's almost like a silvery type substance. And so I can imagine any vapors that would come off of that would probably poison you as well. And so the treatment for this will be, and this is a drug you're going to hear a lot, is Dimipropyl. That's what you give to somebody when they have taken a poison, or you think that they may have been poisoned. This will help excrete all the stuff from the body. Not saying they still won't go through all the harsh stuff, but it will get rid of some of the stuff in the body, and can be eliminated, you know, by their urine or whatnot, and so it can go away. Now, here's a famous poisoning that blew my mind, okay? In 2008, a man named Tony Winnett died from mercury vapors, see, after trying to extract gold from his computer motherboards. His home had to be gutted because the mercury contamination was so severe. Just from him melting and doing things trying to make a computer. Yeah. Like, what? I read that and I was just like mind blown. I was like, oh, staying away from mercury. Let's talk about arsenic. Something that we've talked about a million times before, I know, but it's so very important. Arsenic has been used, like I say, in so many things. So many things. Its symptoms of chronic arsenic poisoning is itching, tenderness of the mouth, loss of appetite, nausea, diarrhea, and a swelling of the tissues, especially of the face and the eyelids, which result in the accumulation of fluid. The symptoms of acute arsenic poisoning are vomiting, diarrhea, numbness in the feet, stomach pains, muscular cramps, intense thirst, urine suppression, collapse, coma, and death. When I think of arsenic, does anybody else think of flowers in the attic? Is it just me? Am I that old? Like, seriously, because that's what the mom was like putting on the food, you know? Was arsenic in like very small portions so that she could like kill her kids over time. Yeah, bonkers, right? Well, is there a treatment for this? The agent, the dimethicol, can help the body naturally excrete arsenic as it binds with the arsenic ions and helps the kidneys filter them out through the bloodstream. Stomach pumping is also a common treatment if administered quickly after the arsenic has been ingested. So it's not going to help to pump your stomach if they're doing it acutely, like over time or whatnot. And so this poisoning, this is the famous poisoning for arsenic, and it's kind of a little bit gross. So this French woman named Marie Lafarge famously poisoned her husband Charles with arsenic in 1840. She took the poison from piles of arsenic used to kill rats from around her house and replaced it with white flour, so nobody would think anything was amiss, I guess. Charles's body was exhumed twice to test for arsenic and was so badly decomposed that samples had to be taken with a spoon of this man. They had to scoop this man up with a spoon to take samples of him. That's nasty. That's nasty. They found arsenic finally, and she was sentenced to hard labor at like a labor camp for like the rest of her life. Yeah. I was going to do a whole separate story on her, but I figured let's just do all the poisons, you know. So the next one is canarthids, which is like a beetle, like the Spanish fly, that real flashy looking, almost like on a June bug. How they got that real flashy, different color wings that turn like bluish, goldish green. That's what we're talking about. These have very, very toxic and blistering effects, okay? It's really, really bad. If brief contact with the poison can also really irritate your skin very badly. Not only that, when it's ingested, it can cause internal hemorrhaging of the intestinal tract and renal dysfunction. Yeah, that's not good. They were first introduced in 1810 by a chemist named Pierre-Jean Robiquet, who announced it was a violent poison second only to strychnine. Yeah, old dude did not like that stuff very much. Okay, so the symptoms of it are what? Well, it causes irritation to any organic matter it touches, like your fingers, your arm, whatever. If it's touched you, it's going to leave a mark, basically. Okay, even 2 milliliters of the toxin can be burning to the mouth, throat, and stomach, followed by vomiting and bloody diarrhea. Higher doses can lead to heart and kidney failure, coma, and death. Unfortunately, there is no antidote for this poison. No, there is not. Drinking water can help dilute the poison, which is always a good thing. But yeah, there's no cure for it. And so, there was a London office manager named Arthur Ford that accidentally murdered his workmate Betty Grant in 1954 by lacing her sweets with carthids. Yes, thinking it was going to make her all happy and like, you know, lovey-dovey, you know, and all this other kind of stuff. Like I told you guys earlier, how they be using this stuff as an ointment to like fly or think that they're flying, you know. Yeah. So he thought, okay, I'm going to put it in her food and she's going to fall in love with me, right? Yeah, no, it killed her. It freaking killed her, dude. And so old dude, of course, ends up getting in trouble. He confessed and was jailed for 5 years. Obviously, he didn't mean to, but yeah, he still got the gut. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. Why are you even messing with that? I bet he just went around and caught a bunch of Spanish flies and just ground them up in a grinder. So let's talk about the plant that is responsible for more poisonings than any other plant out there, and that is datura. Okay, this stuff grows out in the wild, and people mistake it for like lilies and things of that matter. But the seeds and the little pod that is in there can really wreak havoc on you. Oh my gosh! Now some people do it for fun. Okay, but I did read something on the internet about a guy that did it, but he didn't know the dosage to take. He made a tea out of it, and I don't think he's come down yet, and it's been like months. So it's not something to mess with. Okay, so the three toxic chemicals in datura are the hyoscine, the atropine, and the scopolamine. We've talked about scopolamine before. Um, these are powerful anticoagulant agent properties that block the actions of neurotransmitters in between cells, therefore affect how the body functions. Okay, I'm telling you, it really messes you up. Datura is no joke. I mean, it can be, like I say, if you take it in small doses and you're under the supervision of somebody that knows exactly what they're doing, I don't see a problem with trying it. I'm not. Not touching that with a 10-foot pole. The symptoms of datura poisoning have been described as red as a beet, dry as a bone, blind as a bat, and mad as a hatter. That's quote unquote. It ain't nothing to play with, okay? Just saying. This includes dry mouth, excessive thirst, hot skin, headache, slurred speech, impaired coordination, vertigo, weak pulse, disorientation, urinary retention, constipation, hallucinations, convulsions, coma, and death. Hospitalizations and fatalities from datura overdoses, either accidental or deliberate, are super common. Okay, so don't be taking stuff out there in the woods without you knowing exactly how much you need to take. Because, like I said earlier, these plants, they grow next to each other, doesn't mean that they're the exact potency as the other mother plant. You see what I mean? You got to keep that in your thought process. So, but let's talk about a funny story about datura. It's actually kind of funny. So in 2008, this family goes to Maryland in USA, where they were found confused, laughing uncontrollably, vomiting, and hallucinating. 30 minutes later, 2 family members fell unconscious and the others became aggressive, incoherent, and disorientated. They had eaten a stew accidentally seasoned with datura. Imagine that camping trip just going completely, utterly sideways. Wow. Now, let's talk about strychnine. What does it do? Well, it kind of does exactly what it says it does. It restricts your movements. You cannot do much. You can't do anything. It restricts your movements. And of course, if you take too much of it, it can stop your breathing, obviously, because you can't use your body. It's the weirdest thing in the world when you can't use your body. Okay, I've had 2 C-sections. And it's the weirdest thing in the world to lose all function of the lower half of your body completely. So you can imagine this strychnine would be very, very scary to give somebody that didn't know what was fixing to happen. Okay? It binds with a bunch of neurotransmitters that sends messages between nerves and cells. One of the nerves tells the one to fire, the other one tells it to stop. So the strychnine attaches to the glycerin receptors, therefore blocking the signal for a nerve to stop. So imagine that. You have the nerves continue movement, but you can't move. So and then if they do move, it's uncontrollable. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. Symptoms that attacks the central nervous system and causes the victim's muscles to contract simultaneously, especially in the legs, arms, back, neck, and face. Now, this is the one that we've talked about that leaves us, that people die with a smile on their face with strychnine because it restricts their muscles so hard. They die with a smile on their face. Yes, I know I've talked about this in previous, but we're going over it again. And so it is possible to avert death through strychnine poisoning if the stomach is flushed before symptoms appear. So you got to know that you've taken this stuff before you can even try to get healed. It's very, very bad. So the Nazi SS officer Oskar Derlewanger was a notorious sadist and psychopath who used to strip Jewish women prisoners and inject them with strychnine to watch them convulse to death for entertainment. Yeah, that one's not too funny. It's kind of fucked up. But I'm just glad that's over. So let's talk about chloroform. Now, chloroform, it actually had a lot of good uses to it, okay? Chloroform was actually discovered independently in the United States, France, and Germany in the early 1830s. The first reports of its abuse followed soon afterwards. I guess if you do enough of it, some of it will. I know they used to use it to put people out for surgery a long, long, long time ago so that they wouldn't feel anything. They'd just be completely out. But of course, with anything, you can abuse anything and it become addicted to it. And so people would inhale it all the time and just constantly inhaling it. It reminds me of that American Horror Story when he's giving Schmorsons down there and he's inhaling the chloroform and it's not knocking him out because he's got such a huge tolerance to it, but it does for the other chick. But anyway, so chloroform can be absorbed through the lungs, like I say, the in your stomach and even in the skin. Once it's ingested, chloroform is rapidly absorbed and distributed to all of your organs. Every single one of them, gets got. This can result in the central nervous system depression, changes in the respiratory rate, heart irregularities. I got it. Intestinal pain and toxicity in the liver and kidneys. Chronic exposure can lead to serious blood, kidney, and liver damage. Even 10 milliliters of chloroform is enough to kill an adult. That's why when we be seeing Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, which is probably another person that y'all don't know who I'm talking about, but she just used like a couple of drops on her little napkin thing whenever she would do surgery on people. Okay, I'm going to stop now, for real. Now, the symptoms of chloroform poisoning include headaches, nausea, vomiting, irritability, confusion, drowsiness, and intoxication, followed by respiratory arrest, heart attack, coma, and death. Unconscious caused by chloroform usually takes several minutes depending on the dose. The difficulty in calculating a safe dose with chloroform's toxic effect on the organs and are two reasons why it is no longer used. Because it's hard to judge, especially you got to take into account like somebody's weight and height and the medicines they're already taking, the stuff they're eating, those types of things. And so one of the most famous poisonings we're going to talk about is H.H. Holmes. If you don't know who H.H. Holmes is, he's like one of America's very first serial killers. I've watched way too much stuff about this guy. And he was a 19th century swindler and a con man known as America's first serial killer. He would use chloroform on his victims to trap or kill them in his purpose-built murder castle before cashing in their life insurance. Yeah, so along with arsenic and strychnine, we have cyanide. Those are like the top 3 worst ones you could possibly even go through. They have incredibly terrible toxic effects. Like I say, they used this gas during the Holocaust in a way to purposely, kill people. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. It's hard for me to say that out of my mouth. The symptoms of acute cyanide poisoning are dizziness, headache, nausea, slow heart rate, loss of consciousness, convulsions, lung damage, respiratory failure, confusion, coma, and death. A lethal dose of cyanide could be as little as 300 milligrams of solid cyanide or 100 milligrams of hydrogen cyanide, which is probably liquid. Death can occur within 20 minutes of ingestion or inhalation. So how can we treat this? Well, like the other two, there is no treatment because it works so freaking quick. If you don't know that you've taken it and then start doing something, then it's not a good thing. The cyanide antidote kits are available, and they include the drug amyl nitrate, sodium nitrate, and sodium disulfide. So they do have a way that can help you not go through the stuff, but it's still in your system. You just gotta let it pass through. You know what I mean? So in the late 1950s, KGB agent Bohdan Shnotsky assassinated Ukrainian nationalist leader Lev Revit and Stephen Bandera with a spray gun that fired gas from a crushed cyanide capsule. Is that not insane? Who would think to do that? To crush up cyanide, put it into a capsule, and then shoot it at somebody. Like, doesn't the bullet do enough, right? And then you're gonna put cyanide in it too, mix it up with the. Yeah, is that not just the craziest thing ever? And in 1982, 7 people died, okay, in Chicago from packets of painkillers that was actually Tylenol spiked with cyanide. This is nuts. The poisoner was never found, although the incident did lead to tamper-proof packaging. So, thankful for these few people that died. Now we have tamper-proof packaging when it comes to Tylenol. Because freaking cyanide. So let's talk about ricin now. As I know that I'm sure y'all have heard that before from Breaking Bad. Yes, ricin is a very, 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 very bad thing. Ricin is an extremely potent toxin and extracted from the castor bean. Yeah, as we all know, from the show. We learn stuff from TV shows over here. So it's actually used for castor oil. Ricin is the most commonly manufactured into a white powder. Okay. Now, its toxic effects occur after ingestion or inhalation of the substance or having it injected. Okay. The symptoms include difficulty breathing, fever, coughing, tightness in the chest, and nausea. It kind of appears like the flu. Vomiting, bloody diarrhea, and low blood pressure can follow, and the victim's lungs sometimes fill with fluid. If the poison progresses, it leads to respiratory failure and severe organ damage. The sufferer's spleen, liver, and kidneys may stop working altogether, leading to death. Ricin is no joke. There's no antidote for ricin either, and there's all medical professions can do is flush the poison out of the body and really with charcoal and just hope for the best. Yeah. Straight up. That is ricin is there is no coming back from ricin. So yeah, I'm just saying it's very, 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 very dangerous. So in 2014, yes, 2014, an American teenager named Nicholas Hellman sent a scratch and sniff birthday card contaminated with ricin to his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend. Okay? After being discovered, Hellman was arrested following a shootout with the police. This man tried to kill his ex's new, with ricin. I feel like because of the date, 2014, Breaking Bad might have had a little tiny piece of that. I don't know, I mean, the guy had to have gotten the idea from somewhere, but I'm glad that they caught him, seriously. So let's talk about thallium and what it does. It breaks down the cells in the human body, especially the hair follicle cells and those in the central nervous system. Yeah. Taking up to 3 weeks to have an effect. Thallium poisoning usually shows through extreme hair loss followed by respiratory depression, kidney and liver and heart failure, and death. Thallium can also cause brain damage, personality disorders, and even psychotic behavior in some victims. Yeah, so some famous thallium poisonings. In 2004, Russian soldiers became ill after finding a tin of mysterious white powder in a rubbish dumpster near their military barracks. The soldiers used the thallium as a talcum powder on their feet and added it to their cigarette tobacco. Yeah. But all miraculously survived this experience. I guess they didn't use too much of it because they were a little bit too scared, which I don't blame them. They should have been. They should have been scared. Thallium is no joke. It is very soft. It's bluish white metal that bears a chemical resemblance to, I think it's titanium, and is found in trace amounts in the Earth's crust. So it's not a bad thing as long as you don't use a whole lot. You cannot be exposed to it. That's for sure. You cannot be exposed to it whatsoever. There is a treatment for it though. It's called Prussian blue. You're probably like, what is Prussian blue? Well, that's the actual pure blue coloring that is the antidote for thallium poisoning, and is given alongside a stomach pumping of the intestinal tract. Yes. And lastly, we have anthrax. Yes, anthrax. Not a good thing at all. Anthrax is a disease that's actually caused by a bacteria called Bacillus anthracus. The bacterium can produce lethal spores. Hold on, I'm trying to line my lips and talk at the same time, and that's tough, you know. These spores can be weaponized into a powder or a liquid and used as a poison. Yes. Is that not intense? It's pretty crazy. Let's see. The symptoms of anthrax poisoning are as follows. Inhalation anthrax first presents itself with flu-like symptoms, including a sore throat, muscle aches, and fatigue. These develop into a shortness of breath, vomiting, skin sores, delirium, fever, shock, and death. The treatment is an anthrax vaccine. Yeah, I did not know that they had an anthrax vaccine. Okay. It was used to protect the United States military personnel. It's not, obviously, it's not widely available to the public. Which that just means my husband got that shot. So I can go in there and tell him real quick. I forgot to tell him about that when I was doing this. Because, you know, you get so many shots when you go into the military. You don't know what you're getting. You know, you're just in line and you've been awake for hours. And so you just do whatever they tell you to do. You know what I mean? Anyway, so anthrax, they have this vaccine that's only for the U.S. military, and they have antibiotics that can prevent against the infections that can be caused by inhaling anthrax. Okay, and there's quite a few famous poisonings when it comes to anthrax. Now, anthrax is actually mentioned in the Bible. Yes, it was mentioned in the biblical book of Exodus, and basically, and many scholars believe that the 5th of the 10 plagues of Egypt may have been an outbreak of anthrax, because it is a bacteria, you know? In 2006, a New York drum maker became sick with anthrax after processing animal hides to turn them into drum skins. He did survive the infections, okay? In 2009 and 2010, an outbreak of anthrax poisoning occurred among the intravenous drug users in the United Kingdom and Germany. Although they appeared to have cutaneous anthrax, they did not show the telltale raised sores with the black center. Doctors now believe that the anthrax spores were in the heroin that they injected. Yeah. So if you're injecting stuff, quit. If you're doing that kind of stuff, you need to quit, because I'm telling you, all these things are so horrible for your body. And the way that we've seen a lot of these used through time is really hard to read about sometimes, especially when it comes to the cyanide poisoning and things like that. It was so easy to get away with those types of things, especially if you had any kind of nobility. You could get away with poisoning people. I mean, we saw it when it came to King Louis's court. I mean, when he found out that there was poisoners among him, or witches, you know, as they would call them, there are poisoners now, then he completely lost his mind, you know. And so, but it's understandable, because it is a very scary thing, especially for high-ranking officials, that these are actual possibilities for them almost every single day of being exposed to these types of chemicals. I didn't even go over sarin gas, because sarin gas is just awful in itself. It's just one of the worst things ever. So I really wanted to do this episode because I know I talk a lot about poisoners, but I do that because of King James and the way he decided to change the Bible. And so I'm just kind of going off of what he thinks a witch is, and, you know, and talking about these old poisoners. But of course I had to go ahead and I've made a torture video, the history of torture. Why not make the history of poison? Am I right? So, but the next video that you guys see of mine will be the history of Nakalula Falls. I'm going there this weekend. I'm going to film, visit with my fam, all that fun stuff. And then when I come home, I will edit and all that fun stuff in the video. So, that's today's story for you today, guys. I know I read a lot, but it's just a lot to remember, a lot of symptoms, a lot of things. Anyway, so if nobody's told you guys today, I love you, and please subscribe. That would help me out so much, and I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys very, very soon. Coming from Nakalula Falls. It's going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be Native history, so it's going to be even more fun. Much love.